My grandmother died on a Tuesday, the way practical women tend to quietly, without drama, with her affairs in better order than anyone knew. She was 81, sharp until the last year, and the kind of woman who kept receipts for everything, including, as it turned out, the people who betrayed her. I drove 4 hours from Atlanta to get there, taking the back roads out of habit. I'm a forensic accountant. I trace money for a living where it goes, who moved it, and why they're lying about both. I've spent 6 years reconstructing financial fraud for insurance companies and law firms, which means I've learned that the most dangerous lies are the ones dressed in family dinners and holiday cards. I should have applied that same logic to my own blood years earlier. I didn't. That's the thing about proximity, it makes you stupid. The house was already full when I arrived. My mother stood near the kitchen, still in her coat, looking smaller than I remembered. She has early-stage Parkinson's, diagnosed 2 years ago, and the tremor in her right hand had gotten worse since I'd last seen her at Christmas. She smiled when she spotted me, and the relief in it hit harder than I expected. My uncle was already holding court in the living room, working the room the way he always did at gatherings, one hand on someone's shoulder, laugh slightly too loud, eyes checking the door whenever a new person entered. His wife sat close to him, upright, composed, the kind of composed that looked practiced rather than natural. I'd driven 4 hours. I barely had my coat off before my grandmother's attorney found me. His name was Robert Aldous, and I knew him only by reputation, cautious, old school, not the kind of man who made scenes. He crossed the room with purpose, stopping just beside me with his voice low enough that no one else could catch it. "I'm glad you came," he said. "I need you to stay after the reading. Not with your family. Just you." I looked at him directly. "That sounds serious." He didn't flinch. "Your grandmother asked me to give you something. Something she didn't want your uncle seeing before you did." He paused, eyes moving briefly toward the living room. "She was very specific about that." "How specific?" She said, and I'm quoting, "If Thomas finds out before Claire does, he'll destroy it." I said nothing. I just nodded, and he moved away before anyone could notice we'd been speaking. For the rest of the reading, I sat between my mother and a second cousin I barely knew, watching my uncle's face while the attorney read clauses aloud. My uncle was a good performer, attentive, occasionally dabbing at his eyes with a folded handkerchief, but I've spent enough time reading financial depositions to recognize when someone's listening for their name and when they're listening for someone else's. He was waiting for mine. After everyone else filtered out, Aldous locked the front door and led me into my grandmother's study. He set a manila envelope on the desk without ceremony and folded his hands over it. "She started bringing me documents 18 months ago," he said. "Small things at first, bank statements with entries she didn't recognize, transfers she hadn't approved, then larger things, power of attorney paperwork she swore she hadn't signed, a change to her investment accounts she had no memory of authorizing." My jaw tightened. "She came to you instead of the family. She didn't trust the family. Not all of it." He held my gaze. "She trusted you. She said you were the only one in the family who'd know what she was looking at." "Did she have a diagnosis?" I asked. Because I already suspected the answer. "Early cognitive decline. Diagnosed 14 months ago. Your uncle's wife drove her to the appointment. He let that sit. Your mother was never told." The room felt smaller. I put both hands flat on the desk. He used the diagnosis to establish guardianship. He tried to. Your grandmother caught it before the paperwork was finalized. She revoked the attempt, quietly, through me. But the financial damage by then, he opened the envelope. She'd been tracking it herself. For 8 months. Inside was a series of printed bank statements, highlighted in yellow with notes in my grandmother's handwriting in the margins. Neat, deliberate, the same handwriting I remembered on birthday cards and recipe cards and grocery lists she used to tape to the refrigerator when I visited in the summers. Seeing it now felt like she was still in the room, still methodical, still refusing to let the wrong people win. The notations were precise. Small withdrawals, $300, $600, $850, all from her household account. Then larger ones from her investment portfolio, transfers routed through a third-party account she'd never opened. 12 of them over 7 months, totaling just under $190,000. every one of them time-stamped between 6 and 7, 30 inches the morning. Hours she would have been asleep or at breakfast, never at her computer. She said something else, Aldous said quietly. She said she started feeling confused after dinners at his house. More than she should have for someone her age. She wrote it down. He turned to a handwritten page near the back of the stack. Her words. In smaller script than the margins. As if she'd been writing carefully, conserving space. I am not losing my mind. I know the difference between forgetting and being made to forget. Last Thursday after dinner I could not remember the drive home. Thomas drove me. I did not finish my wine. I set the page down very carefully. Did she have blood work done? I asked. Once, independently, through her regular physician. She scheduled it herself without telling your uncle. The results showed elevated sedative compounds consistent with benzodiazepine exposure. She didn't take any benzodiazepines. I stood up and walked to the window. The street outside was ordinary. Neighbors walking dogs. A kid on a bicycle, the kind of street where you don't imagine this kind of thing is happening behind any of the doors. She built a case, I said. She built a case, he confirmed. For me. She said you'd know what to do with it. She said your mother wouldn't be able to handle it alone, and she was right. He pushed the envelope fully toward me. There's one more thing. A letter. She sealed it herself. The envelope had my name written on it in her handwriting. Claire, with a period after it the way she always wrote. Definitive. Finished. Inside was a single folded card. 2 sentences. You've spent your career following money people think they've hidden. Follow mine. Make sure your mother keeps what I left her. I folded the card and put it in my jacket pocket. When I turned back to Aldous, my expression was steady. I'd trained it to stay that way. I need copies of everything, I said. I need to know which accounts were affected and whether any of the power of attorney language made it into any binding documents before she caught it. I have a full file prepared, he said. I've been keeping it off-site. Good. Don't let my uncle know you gave me anything yet. He nodded. She said you'd say that, too. I drove to my mother's rental. She'd moved into a smaller place after my grandmother's health declined, closer to the family home, and let myself in with the spare key. She was already there, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea she hadn't touched, staring at nothing in particular. He was very quiet on the way out, she said, meaning my uncle. He usually is when something doesn't go the way he planned. She looked up. What do you mean? I sat across from her and chose my words slowly. My mother wasn't fragile, but she'd been dealing with her own health for 2 years, and she'd spent her whole adult life believing her brother was difficult but not dangerous. I needed her steady, not blindsided. I think something's been wrong with Grandma's finances for a while, I said. I think she knew it, and I think she documented it, and I think she left it to me to figure out the rest. My mother set down her tea. The tremor in her hands stilled the way it does when she's focusing. How much are we talking about? Close to 200,000. That I can see so far. She was quiet for a long time. Outside, a car passed slowly. Then, he drove her to all her appointments the last 2 years. He said it was because I had enough to deal with. She looked at her hands. I thought he was being kind. I know. She never said a word to me. She was protecting you. I put my hand over hers. She did what she could on her own. Now I'm going to finish it. My uncle called me the next morning before 8. I let it ring twice before answering, giving myself exactly those 2 seconds to settle my voice. Claire. He sounded warm, practiced warm. I didn't get a chance to really talk to you yesterday. How are you holding up? Fine, I said. Just going through some things. Of course. A pause, carefully timed. I wanted to talk to you about the estate. Some of the account paperwork is a little complicated, and I think it'd be easier if we handled it as a family before it goes to the attorneys. Keep things simple. Simple how? Well, there are some accounts that weren't listed in the will formally. Housekeeping accounts. Joint accounts she had with me for managing her care. If we can just he cleared his throat, consolidate things before the probate process starts, it'll save everyone a lot of headaches. I appreciate that, I said evenly. Let me look at the documents and I'll get back to you. Another pause, slightly longer. Of course. The sooner the better, though, realistically. Some of these things have time windows. Understood, I said, and hung up. He just told me everything I needed to know. The accounts he mentioned weren't complicated. He'd set them up specifically to move money without triggering a probate review. He'd been planning this consolidation before my grandmother was even buried. The only thing standing between him and clean access was me, and he didn't know yet that I was already 3 steps ahead. I opened my laptop, pulled out Aldis's file, and started working. It took me 2 days to reconstruct the full picture. The kind of work I do for clients usually takes weeks. But I knew the terrain. I'd been reading financial statements since I was 23, and my grandmother had done half the documentation herself. The transfers originated from a joint account my uncle had been quietly co-authorized on 2 years earlier, around the time of her diagnosis. He'd kept the authorization narrow enough that it didn't trigger automatic oversight flags. Small transfers routed through a business account registered to his wife's name, a landscaping LLC that hadn't invoiced a single client in 3 years. He'd been billing my grandmother for landscaping services at her townhouse, with a concrete patio and no garden. I also found the power of attorney document, the one my grandmother had caught and revoked. It had been drafted to give him decision-making authority over her medical care and financial accounts. One signature line was blank. The other had her name on it in a handwriting that wasn't quite right. The letters too even, the pressure too consistent. Not the way an 81-year-old woman with early cognitive decline signs her name on a legal document. I photographed everything and called the State Fraud Division. The investigator's name was Sandra Voss. She had the voice of someone who'd heard every version of this story and wasn't shocked by any of them, which was exactly what I needed. "Bring me the documents," she said, "original and copies, and don't tell the family you've contacted us." I wasn't planning to. Good. We'll run the financial trail from our end. If the signature is forged, we'll get a handwriting expert on it. That alone is enough to open a formal inquiry. A pause. "You said you're forensic?" 6 years. "Then you already know what this looks like." "I know what it looks like," I said. "I need someone official to be the one saying it." My uncle called again 3 days later. This time his wife was on the line too. "Claire, we're a little concerned," she said, adopting the tone people use when they've rehearsed being reasonable. "You haven't been returning Thomas's messages, and the estate situation is becoming time-sensitive." "I've been going through documents," I said. "Of course, but some of this really doesn't need a forensic review. It's family finances, not a corporate audit." A small laugh, slightly strained at the edges. "We're all on the same side here, are we?" I asked pleasantly. "A beat. What does that mean?" "It means I want to make sure everything is correct before anything gets signed. My grandmother was careful with her money. I want to honor that." My uncle's voice came in, lower. "Claire, I understand you're thorough by nature. But you're not here in a professional capacity. You're here as family." "There's a difference." "There is," I agreed, "which is why I'm being careful. There are accounts that could be frozen if probate drags on," he said. "That affects your mother too." I noted the threat and filed it. "I'll be in touch soon," I said, and ended the call. Sandra Voss confirmed the forged signature 2 days later. She also confirmed that the Landscaping LLC had received 41 wire transfers from my grandmother's accounts over 16 months, totaling $187,400. The LLC's only registered activity was its own incorporation filing. "We're opening a full investigation," she said. "Fraud, elder financial abuse, and potentially forgery on the POA document. I need you to do something for me." "What's that?" "Meet with them. Let them think you're close to cooperating. We need recorded conversation confirming they knew the accounts weren't legitimate and that they're attempting to pressure you into covering it." I already knew she was going to ask. "Where and when?" "Somewhere public. Not your mother's house. You'll be wired. We'll have 2 investigators within 100 feet. "How long does it need to go?" "Until they say something they can't take back," she said. In my experience with this type, it doesn't take long. I texted my uncle that night. "Can we meet tomorrow? I've looked at the documents. I think we can work this out." He replied in under 3 minutes. "Thank you. Coffee at Harrington's on 5th, 10 a.m. That was fast. which told me he'd been sitting with his phone. Sandra's team fitted me with a small device the next morning, just below my collarbone, under a cardigan. She ran through the process quickly, and I paid attention without asking her to repeat herself. I knew the protocol. I'd been an expert witness in enough fraud cases to understand how this kind of evidence needed to sound clean, unambiguous, voluntary on their part. I drove to Harrington's alone. Sandra's team was already in position before I parked one investigator in a window seat inside, one in a car across the street. I ordered coffee at the counter and chose a corner table with sightlines to both exits. My uncle and his wife arrived together, which I'd expected. He was dressed neatly, too neatly for a casual coffee, the kind of over-prepared appearance people adopt when they're about to try to talk someone out of something. She carried a folder under her arm. They sat down. She set the folder on the table like an offering. "We're glad you reached out," she said, smiling the kind of smile that didn't reach anywhere above the nose. "We were worried you were pulling away from the family." "I needed time to think," I said. "Of course." My uncle folded his hands. "And where are you landing?" "I'm still trying to understand the accounts," I said. "Specifically the landscaping transfers." A flicker crossed his face. Too quick for most people to catch. "That was for ongoing property maintenance," he said. "Your grandmother couldn't manage it herself." "The LLC doesn't have any employees," I said. "No equipment registrations, no tax filings past the first year." His wife cut in, voice smooth. "There were contractors, independent workers. It was informal. 41 transfers over 16 months, though," I said. "For a concrete patio." Silence. My uncle leaned forward. "Claire, I know what this looks like." "What does it look like?" "It looks like something it isn't." His voice shifted, quieter. The kind of quiet that means the warmth has been dropped. "Your grandmother had needs that the family quietly covered. I covered them. The accounts reflect that. With money from her own portfolio," I said. "With money that was being managed on her behalf. That's what a co-authorized account is for." His wife touched the folder. "If you sign the consolidation documents, everything moves forward cleanly. Your mother gets her inheritance, the estate closes. No one has to go through a long and expensive probate process." She pushed the folder toward me. "It's straightforward." I didn't touch it. "What's in it?" "Just a release acknowledging the joint account management was authorized. Standard language, authorizing what was done with the money." She held my gaze, closing the chapter. My uncle's hand moved toward the folder. "You're a forensic accountant. You know how ugly probate gets when people contest every line item. Your mother is not well. Do you really want to put her through a year of that?" There was the threat again. Better phrased this time. More patient. "I'm not going to sign something I haven't reviewed," I said. "You've been reviewing for a week," he said. Sharper now. "How long does this need to take?" "As long as it takes," I said. His wife's composure cracked, just at the edges. "We are trying to protect this family." "From what?" I asked. "From exactly this," she said. "From someone deciding that 6 years of managing an elderly woman's care is somehow suspicious." We were there. Every appointment, every medication, every time she fell and needed someone. "Where were you, Claire?" "In Atlanta." She said it like a verdict. "I was in Atlanta," I agreed. "And she was here. With you." I paused, taking her to every appointment, driving her home from dinners when she couldn't remember the ride. Her expression changed. "Not much, but enough." "The benzodiazepine result in her blood work was from a test she ran herself," I said, "without telling either of you. She kept the results with her attorney." My uncle's jaw locked. "That's..." "She documented everything," I said, keeping my voice level. "The transfers, the signature on the POA, the medication. She did it for months, because she knew what was happening and she knew she needed someone who could read it properly." I looked directly at him. "She knew you'd try to close this before I could." His wife stood up first. "You're making a very serious accusation." "I'm not accusing you of anything," I said. "I'm describing documents that already exist." My uncle's hands flattened on the table. "Sign the release, Claire. Do it for your mother." "My mother," I said, "is exactly why I won't." He stared at me for a long moment with the expression of someone running out of angles. You're going to regret making this into something bigger than it is. I think we're done with coffee, I said. They left without the folder. His wife walked too fast. My uncle kept his pace controlled, which was worse. It meant he was already recalculating. I watched their car pull out of the lot, then sat for another full minute before my phone buzzed. Sandra Voss. Clean audio. We have everything we need. I finished my coffee before I left. The arrest happened 6 days later. Sandra's team executed the warrants at their house early in the morning, the kind of timing that doesn't allow for preparation or rehearsal. I wasn't there, and I didn't need to be. I was at my mother's kitchen table when she called me, voice quiet and careful the way she'd learned to be about hard news. Did you know this was coming? She asked. Yes, I said. A pause. For how long? Since the reading. Maybe longer if I'd been paying closer attention. She was quiet for a moment. I could hear her breathing, the slight irregularity that the Parkinson's gave to everything now. I keep thinking about all the dinners, she said finally. He'd refill her glass without asking. I thought he was being attentive. I know. She never said a word to me. She was protecting you, I said. She knew you were already dealing with enough, and she didn't want you to doubt yourself more than you already were. I would have done something. She knew that too, I said. That's why she was afraid you'd confront him before there was enough proof. She wanted it airtight. Another pause. She left it to you. She left it to both of us, I said. She just knew I had the tools to see it first. My mother exhaled, not relief, not quite, but something adjacent to it. The sound of someone setting down a weight they hadn't realized they were carrying. What happens now? Now it goes to trial, I said. And you get what she left you. The courtroom was smaller than I expected for a case that had taken this long to reach it. White walls, fluorescent light, the kind of institutional quiet that made every sound carry further than it should. I sat in the second row behind the prosecution table, not directly behind it, close enough to hear, far enough to stay steady. My uncle entered without looking at me. His wife looked once, briefly, and then fixed her eyes on the middle distance and kept them there. Sandra's financial analyst led the first day of testimony, walking the jury through 16 months of transfers with the patience and precision of someone who knew that clarity mattered more than drama. She used a simple chart: account origin, transfer date, receiving LLC, amount. The pattern was undeniable even to someone who'd never read a financial statement. 41 transfers, 1 recipient. 0 services rendered. The handwriting expert came next. She displayed my grandmother's authentic signature alongside the one on the POA document on a large screen. Even from where I sat, the difference was visible. The forged version had the evenness of someone copying carefully, none of the slight natural pressure variation of a real signature from a real person in a real moment. My uncle's attorney objected twice. The judge allowed both pieces of evidence through without elaboration. When they played the recording from Harrington's, the courtroom stilled. Not dramatically, there were no gasps, no murmuring, just the particular quiet of a room full of people listening to something that didn't need interpretation. Sign the release, Claire. Do it for your mother. My uncle stared at the table. His wife's hands were folded tightly in her lap. I testified on the third day. The prosecutor had told me beforehand to keep my answers factual and not to editorialize. I didn't need the instruction. I'd testified in fraud cases before, and I knew that the facts, laid out precisely, were more damaging than any emotional language I could add to them. I described the documentation my grandmother had assembled. I described the timeline of the transfers relative to her diagnosis. I described her handwritten notes about the dinners, the drives home, the wine she hadn't finished. When I read her words aloud, I am not losing my mind. I know the difference between forgetting and being made to forget. I kept my voice even and let the sentence do what she had intended it to do. His attorney tried to frame my grandmother's independent blood work as the result of paranoia, suggesting cognitive decline had distorted her perception. The prosecutor countered with the attending physician's testimony, confirming the sedative compounds had no legitimate medical source. Did she have a prescription for any benzodiazepine class medication? The prosecutor asked. No, the physician said. Were there any medical reasons she should have been exposed to those compounds? None. The defense rested after 2 days. The closing argument tried to reframe everything as a misunderstanding between family members with genuinely good intentions. The jury did not appear convinced. They deliberated for 3 hours. When they came back in, my uncle's wife was very still. My uncle had both hands flat on the table, the same posture he'd used at Harrington's, and I recognized it now for what it was, his version of control, when everything else had slipped. On the charge of elder financial abuse, the foreperson said, guilty. On the charge of document forgery, the foreperson said, guilty. On the charge of unlawful administration of a controlled substance, the foreperson said, guilty. My uncle closed his eyes for a moment. His wife made a small sound that wasn't quite a word. The judge thanked the jury and set a sentencing date. The marshals approached the defense table. I didn't stay to watch the full exit. I walked out into the hallway while the room was still settling, and stood by a window at the end of the corridor. My mother was waiting outside in the car. She'd wanted to be in the courtroom, and I'd gently discouraged it, not to protect her from the truth, but because I thought she deserved to hear the outcome from me, not from a room full of strangers. Sandra found me in the hallway before I reached the exit. You want me to tell you what happens next procedurally? She asked. I know what happens next, I said. Sentencing, restitution order, probate reopened. Your mother gets the estate distributed correctly. Yes. I exhaled once, steady. My grandmother made sure of that. Sandra gave me a brief nod, not congratulatory, just acknowledging. The kind of nod one professional gives another when something difficult has been completed correctly. Your grandmother was sharp. She was the sharpest person I knew, I said. She just needed someone to finish what she couldn't. Outside, the afternoon light was bright and flat. I walked to the car, got in, and took my mother's hand for a moment before I said anything. It's done, I said. She nodded. She didn't ask for details yet, and I didn't offer them. We sat there for a moment in the quiet of the parking lot, the kind of quiet that comes after something long and terrible finally stops. Then my mother said, with a steadiness that surprised me, She trusted you. She trusted both of us, I said. She just built the trail early enough that I'd find it. I started the car and pulled out into traffic. The city moved around us, ordinary and continuous. The way cities do when something enormous has just shifted in a life they know nothing about. My grandmother left 2 sentences in a card on an attorney's desk, and they were enough. They always had been. She knew what kind of people she'd raised, and she knew which one would follow the money all the way to the end. She was right. After everything, after the trial, after the sentencing, after the restitution order was formalized, I kept thinking about one thing. Not my uncle's face when the verdict came in. Not the recording at Harrington's. Not even her handwriting in those margins. I kept thinking about the blood work she scheduled herself, quietly, without telling anyone. An 81-year-old woman who suspected she was being sedated at her own son's dinner table, and instead of panicking, instead of confronting him, she made an appointment, gave a blood sample, and filed the results with her attorney. She didn't wait for someone to believe her. She built the case until belief wasn't optional. I think about that whenever someone tells me the elderly are vulnerable, as though vulnerability and strength are opposites. She was both, at the same time, in the same body, fighting something most people would never survive at any age. The question I keep sitting with isn't whether justice arrived. It did. The question is what it takes to notice when someone you love is quietly building a paper trail because they've run out of people they trust enough to just say the words out loud. How many families are living in that silence right now, and how many of us are too close to see it?